Today, we're focusing on mobile app security and finding out exactly where your information is going. That's all coming up on the IT Pro TV podcast, starting right now. All right, hello and welcome to this episode of the IT Pro TV podcast. I'm Peter Van Rysdam, and we've got a couple of great guests with us today. We've been talking a lot in some recent episodes about cybersecurity in general, and today we're going to focus a little bit on the mobile side. And of course, I've got Dom Pazet in studio, but also all the way from France, we have Vivian Raoul, the CTO of Perdayon. And so, Vivian, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for welcoming me to this show.
Of course. Now, first of all, to start off, can you tell us a little bit about Perdayon and what you guys do?
Sure. So, Perdayon, we are a company dedicated to mobile security. We provide solutions to protect our clients from threats coming from the mobile. So, from all the vectors that can target a mobile device, attacks targeting the OS, the network, and especially coming from the mobile applications. So we have developed a unique technology able to analyze the behaviors of apps, reveal what they are doing, and if they are compliant or not with the security policy defined by the companies.
And that kind of is a great segue to what we want to talk about today. I know we came across you guys because of a blog post you wrote specifically about the Uber app, and I think you just kind of picked that as an example, but of showing how when you think you're just contacting Uber, you're actually talking to a lot of different services out there. And so let's talk about that, and specifically that blog post, and I will be able to bring it up here as well when we want to. But why is that something that should concern us, that the apps that we're using are talking to other services and other servers out there?
So what we want to show, and we want to make people aware about the fact that applications are doing things on their devices that they are not aware of. So as you mentioned, Uber is an example among others. But it's an example that talks a lot because it's an application which is largely used by everyone. I mean, I'm a user of Uber myself, of course. And what we want to show is that applications request some permissions. They require the access to some data to work. And we don't even think about it. We accept it, and we let the application run and do whatever it is supposed to do. But in the background, many applications are doing things that should be a concern for most people, especially regarding the privacy and the retrieval of some data. Applications may not have access to and may not gather. We can wonder why these applications are doing so. So that's what we wanted to show and reveal that some apps are quite disrespectful regarding privacy.
Now, I know this has been a growing problem recently because, if you think historically, right, that we all just used to use a regular computer, a desktop PC at your home, and at the end of the day, you'd turn it off. And so it was off a good bit of times, and it didn't have a GPS. It wasn't something you carried with you. You left it in one place. And these mobile devices, we have them on us 24 hours a day. They're always on. They've got GPS. They've got network connectivity no matter where you go. So you have a lot more personal information stored inside of one of these devices, whether it's a personal phone or a corporate phone. And so I know that the risk of applications either intentionally or accidentally gathering way too much data has been getting bigger and bigger and bigger each year. And I think the big trend here is that more and more people are using mobile devices for regular computing than using regular PCs. So just for regular routine stuff, we're using our phones, we're using our iPads or tablets. And when these apps want to gather our data, they can pretty much gather what they want, right? Is that what you guys are finding, is that the apps, they do have to ask for permission in a lot of cases, but people just blindly grant the permissions, don't they?
Absolutely, absolutely. Because if you want to use the application, you have to accept these permissions. So for some applications and on some mobile OS, you can control what you allow or not. But allowing the access to a permission doesn't say what the application will do with the permission. Is it a simple local reading? In this case, it's not a real issue, or is it retrieved by the application? Is it sent towards servers overseas? You can't know about it even by accepting these permissions, and that's something we help companies with because our technology is able to reveal these behaviors.
And I know sometimes they have these bad behaviors that are intentional and malicious, and sometimes it's kind of accidental. I was looking through the blog post. Let me pull that back up. And as you guys dug through the Uber app, some of the report backs that it was doing, the service was reaching out to, are ones that I kind of expect to see these days. And maybe that's a sad statement in and of itself. But, it reports back to PayPal because they do accept PayPal as a form of payment. They do phone backs to doubleclick.net, for advertising, part of Google Ads, as well as other information going to Google. And that's pretty benign. We kind of expect that advertiser type behavior to go on. But some of them are doing far worse, and some are malicious. But another example of one that's not so malicious, I know the Dolphin web browser a few years ago, it was sending every URL you typed back to a server overseas, and they weren't doing it for malicious purposes. They were doing it so that they could find out whether there was like a magazine view or like a readable view they could display instead of the normal site to make it more mobile optimized. So it was a good feature, but the reality was they were sending every URL you clicked on to an overseas server, and they weren't doing it in a secure manner. And that kind of stuff happens a lot. And if you had to guess, how many apps, or like what percentage of apps in the App Store right now phone home or reach out to remote servers like this?
Oh, it's a large percentage of applications that have, let's say, access to data that could seem a little too much, let's say, regarding the app's purposes. So I would say there are about 75% of applications that are retrieving data. So we are not telling that 75% of apps are malicious. We differentiate these intrusive behaviors from malicious behaviors. Fortunately, malicious behaviors are much lower, but we say that almost 3 applications out of 4 have a retrieval of data which is pretty high. So depending on the context of the application, something which can be normal for, let's say, a backup application, backup application that retrieves your pictures to send it to a remote server, does it on purpose, and you know about it. But what we say that most of these applications do it, and you are not aware about it, and you don't know why. So the Dolphin example is a pretty good one, because this is not mentioned in the application that every URL you will type will be retrieved, and this is not something you could disable. So that's an issue if you have no control over it.
And that kind of brings me to a question I had of, is this something we can do anything about as an end user? It sounds like Don was saying, you have the choice of, do I accept, they want to access my contacts, or they want to access this or that. If I say no, then either I'm not getting the full features of the app, or maybe the app doesn't even work at all. If I denied GPS, obviously Uber's going to have a difficult time, for example. So is this just something to be aware of, or is there something we should be doing as end users to protect ourselves?
I think there is a lot to do regarding user awareness, and tell users about why an application would need to access some data. So the public stores have done work in this way, but it's not enough to be very precise about it. So what we aim to do, at least for companies, is to bring up visibility on these actions in order to know exactly what applications are doing, and to authorize applications depending on these behaviors. For end users, I would say there is no way to be fully protected about that if you don't have the tools allowing to give you information about what an app is precisely doing on your device. Because again, permissions are not sufficient to know what will be done with the data once the application will have the access to it.
All right, now this is it's a widespread problem, right? There's a ton of apps that are doing this, but let's talk about Uber specifically, because I know that was the focus of the blog post and some of your findings there. There were some pretty interesting things, right? The phone home to Google, maybe not the most shocking there, but I know you found that the app will, on an Android device at least, check to see if you're rooted. And if you are rooted, it can execute some commands. Were you able to determine what those commands were? Was that like a Google safety net check, or what was that?
Oh, it's not in this case malicious commands to say so, but it's something that should not happen on a regular device. Checking if a device is rooted is pretty common in the applications for different reasons. And most times it's only for analytics purposes or to send information into crash reports. But trying to execute commands with elevated privileges is something which is quite uncommon and that shouldn't be found in a public applications which is not designed for rooted devices.
All right, and I know some of the other things that you spotted. The big glaring one is that there were 3 OWASP vulnerabilities. And for most of you who deal with web application penetration testing, you've heard of the OWASP top 10 vulnerabilities that every developer should be aware of, and making sure that their apps are protected from. And you would think an organization like Uber that has tons of they make a good bit of money, but I think most of their revenue comes from venture capital right now. But they certainly have revenue. That they would have an OWASP top 10 checklist. But you found where there were 3 vulnerabilities present in the app in its current state, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So something I would like to mention about it is that most of the time the vulnerabilities or even the behavior or the retrieval of data do not always come from the proper code of the application, but also from third-party libraries that are embedded into the application. So many developers check their codes and are quite surprised when they see that we reveal such vulnerabilities. But many times it comes from third-party libraries that they embed into the applications. They don't own the source code, so they won't check it, and they will trust these libraries because they are widespread or edited by well-known developers. But many times these libraries embed some things that should not be found. So in the case of Uber, these vulnerabilities have been found in these libraries and not in the proper code from Uber. But at least it shows that these libraries are not tested before the production.
That highlights a problem that we're kind of going through with not just mobile apps, but like Google Chrome extensions, where a developer might choose to incorporate a third-party library because they can add features into their software quickly. They can do it without having to do a lot of rework or offer new functionality they wouldn't normally be able to do. And so they license this library, they incorporate it in their product, and they may test it out and everything looks great and everything's fine on day one. But over time, maybe whoever manages that library changes. They get bought out by another company. They become less trustworthy. And if you're just blindly linking in their library, you could be bringing in an exploit. You could be bringing in an attack and not even knowing it right into your app that other people trust because they trust you. And in the Google Chrome extension world, we're finding that where malicious parties are going and buying the rights to an extension from developers. And as soon as they get it, they immediately inject the demographics and analytics tracking and ad display and all sorts of other things. And it wasn't the original developer's intent to do that. It's now this extra party that's kind of piggybacked onto the app and caused the problem. So I think that's going to become a bigger epidemic in the coming year.
And Don, this reminds me, the last podcast we actually did before this one, we talked about the crack exploit in WPA2 and Raqqa. And one of the things we talked about is how Microsoft is able to get out in front of these with a patch, but Android, for example, takes a lot longer to get those patches out, and you don't have those updates quite as often. And so, talking about the mobile space specifically here and these apps, you're maybe vulnerable for a longer period of time. Is that right?
Well, I would think that with the app, the apps do get patched pretty regular. I mean, I probably pull 10 to 20 updates for apps every couple of days. It seems like on an Android phone. So if it's an app exploit, I think it's much easier to fix. But if it's an app that's incorporated with your phone, like bloatware, you buy a new phone and it's got all this extra software loaded. I know, Vivian, for you over in Europe, it's not such a big problem. But here in the U.S., when we buy a phone, I mean, it is loaded with all sorts of software.
Especially in Android. Yeah.
And you can't uninstall it unless you root the phone, which blows your security anyway. Those types of things, the exploits that happen in the core OS, that becomes a bigger problem. Have you guys at Perdayon, have you seen vulnerabilities or weaknesses like these in applications that are packaged with the phones?
Yes, we have. So we release yearly studies about the security landscape of mobile applications, and we show figures about the security and behaviors of applications by categories, including native applications that are in the ROM of the device when you buy it. And we have the same in Europe. So I won't say any names of manufacturers or no applications, but yeah, we have seen many of these applications that had very strange behaviors, and for some very low, fortunately, but for some we have detected quite malicious behaviors. Like that applications that were literally listening for everything you were doing on your device, including the keystrokes, the stored passwords, etc., that were sent to some remote servers. So that's a concern as well.
So, for our viewers that are watching, if you're just a regular old end user, right, not some security professional or whatever, there's diligence that you can do, right? You can pay attention to the permissions that our apps are asking for. You can say no to an app, believe it or not. There's also a lot of scanning suites that are available in the Android App Store and to a lesser extent in the iOS App Store. Do you find that those scanning apps are effective at all? The ones that like Lookout Mobile, where they scan the apps to look for those advertiser libraries and callbacks. Are those effective solutions for at least identifying these apps?
I would say it's better than nothing, but the thing is, many of these security applications are checking for apps that are commonly known as being malwares. So if they have been scanned into the labs and that a signature has been released, like a classical antivirus for desktop, it's pretty efficient. The problem comes when you have a new application which has never been analyzed, for which the security solutions would say this application is safe because I don't know it, so by default I trust it. And it's no longer efficient because it's very easy to develop an application and to release it either on public stores or on some other sources. So of course, the public stores are sources that can be more trusted than an application you would find on a third-party store or downloaded directly from the internet. So the primary thing to do as an end user is to avoid to install applications coming from an unknown source. But if you do so, if you install an application coming from a random server, most of the security applications won't detect it because they rely on signatures, on known malwares, and not on the behavioral analysis. And this is typically what we what we do by systematically analyzing any applications we don't know yet in our global database. So we are able to provide an answer within a few minutes after the installation of the first application on a device.
Now, how are you guys able to do that? I know the Android App Store and the iOS App Store, they've got millions of apps, and there's just tens of thousands of apps being added every day, most of which are garbage, right? You know, little tiny throwaway apps that nobody cares about. But there's just so many apps. You can't possibly have human beings reverse engineering each APK or whatever to look inside and identify that. So how at Perdayon, how are you guys doing that? How are you basically analyzing each of these applications? Are you just doing it when your customers run them, or are you actively going out and seeking all of these applications?
We do both, actually. We crawl the stores to retrieve applications, but obviously we cannot have in our database all the applications as soon as they are published or updated. So we do that to make our database grow and to have the quickest answer when an application is installed on a device, but we also do it on demand. That means when an application is installed on a device we protect, we will retrieve this application and analyze it. And on Android, we can do that directly on the device and directly retrieve the app, which is sent to our server.
All right. So if we're just a regular end user, maybe we can get by with a regular scanner or something simple like that. But if we're a business, if we're an enterprise, and we really want to make sure that all of our phones are taken care of consistently and securely, what is your solution for that? Like, what can Perdayon do for us?
So we have different services allowing to protect everything related to mobile security. But regarding the protection of mobile devices, we propose the installation of one agent, one Perdayon agent, which controls everything that happens on the device, every system manipulation, any modification of the system which is unauthorized. That it controls every network connections. It scans the network to detect network threats, and it scans the application. So all the apps installed on the devices are systematically scanned and checked against security policy that the client can define in order to automatically allow or not the applications. So this is something we can do by ourselves by blocking applications at runtime if they are uncompliant. And we also have partnerships with EMM and MDM vendors, so vendors that provide solutions to manage the devices in order to enforce specific policies on uncompliant devices. For instance, you could say, I will prevent users from accessing their corporate emails if there is a rogue application on the device that can have access to sensitive data.
And you may have answered my question a little bit there, but I was going to ask: you're not just providing a service to end users, that are using a phone today, but it sounds like you're also providing some services to app developers out there, so that they can maybe test their apps before they're out in the field, or make sure that, like Don was saying before, that the services they're using aren't changing and falling into the hands of malicious actors.
Absolutely. So the first service we provide is the protection of mobile devices, but we also provide two other services more dedicated to developers. The first one to scan the applications and make sure that it doesn't contain any critical vulnerability, that all the behaviors of the applications are compliant with what the application is supposed to do. As well as a service dedicated to critical apps protection as an SDK that can be embedded into the application to allow this app to be aware of the environment where it is running. For instance, if you have a banking application, it is possible from an external app to gain access to your credentials from different attacks, screen loggers, key loggers, etc. With our SDK, the app becomes aware of these threats, and it can adapt its own behavior according to the criticality of these risks that are detected.
Now, I wanted to ask a question that's a little bit kind of off the beaten path, but I was poking around on the website and I noticed where you guys, and you mentioned how you have integrations with some other vendors that are out there. As an IT professional, when I hear, oh, we've got this security solution and it's agent based, I always get kind of frustrated. Like, how many agents can we run on an individual machine? But you guys have actually partnered with VMware and their AirWatch and a few other vendors that all have mobile device management or MDM. And even with like Samsung Knox, where the security sublayer is already there on the phone, you're just kind of piggybacking off it. So it makes it a lot more lightweight and easy to deploy. For my own curiosity, how's that been for you guys? Have you been able to reach out to VMware and Samsung and get a good response? Have they been easy to work with and willing to incorporate security scanners like this? Or has that been an uphill battle to get that kind of enabled and in place? I think it's a great feature. I'm just curious if you get pushback or whether the vendors are really, really looking for this.
Oh, it hasn't been very difficult because the demand comes from the market, and the DMM vendors are asked to add these security features to their offers. So they are providing themselves some security features such as in-app VPN, in-app wrapping, etc., containerization. But they do not provide security mobile-based or dedicated to applications. This is not in the framework of what they are providing. So they are asked to work with players which provide such features. So the answer is no, it hasn't been difficult. We were well welcomed, and it's a very good channel to drain business. We rely a lot on these partners, and till now the biggest projects we have been working on are combined with these players.
Well, that's good to hear. You know, I like to see that the industry as a whole is working towards a solution on this, because it's just going to get worse and worse. And I really see like 5 years from now where the average person just doesn't have a regular laptop or a regular desktop. They just do everything on these mobile devices. The mobile apps are really going to be in the spotlight, and they have access to so much more information than a normal app that I think we really have to be proactive on this. So solutions like yours, solutions like what Samsung and VMware and the other companies are offering, I think they're all going to fit together to kind of create that safer environment.
Yeah, now, it really makes me think twice, too. I know one of the features I thought was so cool when I first used the Uber app was I can take a photo of my my credit card, and it just grabs all that information for me and does that. And now I'm thinking, well, I'm going to go ahead and cancel all my credit cards. But maybe it just makes you think, though, that you know, just to be cognizant of what information you're sending, and know that it's not just going to that trusted vendor that you that you have decided to download that app from, but it could be going to other places. So, you know, maybe in a case like that, you have to put in a credit card if you want to use the service, but maybe you use PayPal then, because you're not passing that information necessarily over the network, or I don't know. It's just a matter of be aware of what things, what information is being shared, and what things you can and cannot turn off in that app. It sounds like is kind of one of the best practices to do as an end user at this point. Yeah. All right, well, thank you so much, Vivian, for joining us today. Is there anything else you want to touch on before we wrap up?
Oh, I think I'm good, unless you have any other questions.
I think we've answered all of our questions.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And, you know, if any of you guys out there want to learn more about Perdayon and what their solutions are, you can always check out their website. It is www.pradeo.com. And be sure to check out their About Us page. You can learn about the company, and they are based out of beautiful France. Wouldn't mind being there right now myself.
Love to be there.
But definitely check them out. Great solutions available. And thank you, you know, Vivian, for doing the blog post and kind of increasing awareness on this. I think it is really important we get that out there for people to check out. So definitely make sure you swing by their website.
Yeah, and rolling down the blog earlier, I saw like they have the mobile application security guide for 2017, so that probably be an interesting read as well to see what else is going out there in the industry right now. But that's going to do it for this podcast. Thank you both of you for joining us, especially joining us all the way from France. I know it's your afternoon already, so thanks for joining us. And for those of you watching, be sure to go ahead and subscribe to our podcast, rate it on whatever service you're using, be it iTunes, Stitcher, TuneIn, Google Play Store. And I guess now go ahead and scan those apps too and see what information is being sent. But those ratings are what help us move up in the App Store and get this podcast out to more people. But for now, we're going to go ahead and wrap it up. So stay tuned for more podcasts from us. But for now, we're going to go ahead and sign off. We'll see you next time.